What's up, YouTube? It's I with the Boat, and the other day I got into a heated discussion about this card called Incense of Doom, and I'm not making this video to discredit or to feel very right in the way I was talking about this card, but I will say that I'm very passionate about deck building. I'm also taking a lot of pride in a lot of things that I do with like card game related stuff, my thought process on deck building, and my thought process on what makes a card good, looking back at your investment and then looking at your return. So a lot of the discussion is me talking in this video, but also you'll be able to read the chat as it goes on and what their thoughts were. And again, this is not to discredit anybody that was, that was in the discussion. In fact, I implore a lot of players to think for themselves because the only way that you can find your own answer or finding the truth is if you really struggle for it. So, if by the end of this video, if you agree with me, great. If you don't, that's cool too. And feel free to do a like, comment, and subscribe if you're new to the channel, but especially make that comment because I am curious on what you guys think, and then maybe we can even further discuss in the comments below. Without further wait, please enjoy the discussion. Thank you again.
Fall into the abyss. Come on. Come on, here I am. Fall into the abyss.
Sure. Alright, if you want to beat Metsubodes, you should not play that one card that he just played against me. This card. Do not play this card. This is not anywhere near in the meta where playing this card in your deck makes sense. Why Disease Souls over Obliteration? Because Disease Souls is the same effect, but for only one MP cheaper. And also there's not really a whole lot of purple matchups that have the whole like, oh, I'm gonna negate your 5 cost thing. So it just makes a lot more sense to run Disease Souls for 1 MP less. I feel like you just play good Teppen. Just play good strategy, play good Teppen, and you don't need this card. Like you really running this as a 1x or more in your deck just to beat decks that use the EX pocket? That seems kind of weird to me. That's Chris's favorite card? Nah. I've already made my argument. This is not worth it right now. Iowa calling out Chris. I didn't even know Chris liked that card that much. This card is not worth playing right now. And then Thirsty gets no credit. You should blame Kyle because I remember Kyle saying it, so he didn't mention you. I would blame Kyle. It's Kyle's fault, wherever he is. I think Kyle's still trying to avoid spoilers. What if you combine it with Purple Bounce? Is that at least okay? Not really, because it's kind of like, what is it? A really interesting way of removing the opponent's cards, but the problem is that even though you remove it from them, they still have a full hand of 5 cards to use. So they didn't really spend any MP to like use the cards that you put back into their pocket and then emptied it out. Like it's cool to remove cards, but you also want to pay attention to how much MP your opponent's spending for it. So if your opponent gets bounced a unit and it goes into their EX pocket, that means that they had to spend like at least 3 MP before that unit got bounced. But when you use Incense of Doom to like empty the pocket, it doesn't cost the opponent anything. It just means that they can't play that card. But in Teppen allows you to have a 30 card deck, you draw 5 cards, and then they just keep refilling over and over again. So this card is not very powerful in most matchups right now. In a lot of the matchups, it's not really worth running Incense of Doom, because you do have other answers to deal with Boat. Like I'm pretty confident if I draw correctly, right? If I draw correctly with this deck, I can beat boat. I can beat the boat deck. And then the same thing with you know, what's it called? Celestial Envoy. I could beat that matchup even though the Takeda play is like my weakness. I can still save my MP and try to deflect whatever they're doing and beat them that way. But to use Curse of Incense, there's like very Incense of Doom, my bad. But to use Incense of Doom, this is very lackluster. There's not a lot of value to running it in your deck. And then when it actually goes off, did you really do anything? Did you really get a whole lot of, value from it? And then I see Chris coming up with an example, like, well, if your opponent wastes a cruel game they copied with Crystal Ball, then yeah, you don't need it. Okay, I think Chris was being sarcastic. But that's kind of the point too, right? You're hoping that in very rare matchups and situations playing on ladder, that if your opponent's playing Metsu boats, then you get to empty their pocket. But it's just such a, like, that's probably like the best case scenario to get it. And then if you're playing against like purple who use foresight and stuff, it's not even guaranteed that whatever you empty out is going to be worth the 1 MP. And then there are other matchups where they don't even use their pockets. It's really weird. It's a 1 MP action with no drawback. I think you guys are underplaying how much 1 MP is. Because you have to remember that using this card gives 2 MP to your opponent. So you're giving them 2 MP and you're not paying attention to like the matchup. So if you're playing against like an aggro matchup, then they get a free buff. If you're playing against Ouroboros, then they get a free rebirth. If you're playing against what do you call it, the mirror match, then they get to destroy your unit. Like in every other matchup, or every matchup actually, in every matchup, if you play this card like starting because you wanted to filter and you had a unit on board, they're going to use Fate of the Unworthy on your card. No, I think you guys are way underplaying like how not good playing a 1 MP action for nothing is. Like here's the weird part to me, because this is kind of how like I'm perceiving you guys telling me these things, is you're telling me that yes, you should run Incense of Doom because it is a 1 MP card that does nothing in the worst case, but you also only had to pay nothing for it. So you get nothing because you paid nothing. I get 1 MP that does nothing. Great. You know, I don't understand that logic, because in my opinion, TEPPEN is a game where a lot of your cards and numbers count towards the last second. That's why we use Disease Souls instead of Obliterate in this deck, because it's 1 MP cheaper and it goes far, in my opinion. It goes far. But this is even worse to play because you're giving 2 MP to your opponent, you're starting the action phase, it's not good in every matchup, and to dedicate one slot of your deck, 30 cards, okay? And listen to this. TEPPEN has 2 years worth of expansions, and you have 30 cards to build a deck, but you want to dedicate one of those slots for a card that may not do anything in most matchups? That's crazy talk to me. So that's my argument. If you're open-minded enough to understand what I was trying to like tell you guys, great. If you still disagree with me, and maybe you have your reasons and maybe I'm the closed-minded one, great. But at the end of the day, that is really how I feel about this card. I understand teching for matchups in card games, but you don't need it. You really don't need it. Number one, you don't need it, and number two, you're literally boarding in a card that does nothing. Even in the okay, so even in the best case scenario where you could be using Incense of Doom, it's like a 50-50 shot whether they have a good card or a bad card in their EX pocket. Like if they Foresight, it could be a bad card. If they Bombast, it could be a bad card. And the thing is that when you use Incense of Doom, you're not forcing them to spend any MP. You didn't force them to spend any MP to play those cards. You just remove the option for it. So then they default on the next plan, which is like playing cards from their hand. But whereas if I use like what's it called? Demonic Intimidation, if I use a removal spell, if I use, you know, Obliterate, if I use Disease Souls, at least my opponent spent MP for me to counter what they were doing.